The Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster has vowed to clamp down on anyone threatening to disrupt elections. It says the government communications and information system will handle any misuse of social media platforms. To tell us more about this, we're joined now by Nomonde Mnukwa, who is the Deputy Director General at the Government Communications and Information Systems. Mr. Mnukwa, good evening to you and thank you for your time. Let's begin with why the Justice and Crime Prevention Cluster, basically the security cluster, is ramping up messaging around misinformation or fake news in the lead up to May 29. What is it that has caused you to make this information out aloud?
Good evening, Toli and the viewers. I think it's a trend globally whereby whenever there are going to be elections, there's some awareness that takes place to the public in general, bringing to their attention what is the acceptable behaviors during the election period. So we are not the first one in South Africa. There are various countries already who have gone through this journey. And remember, we are a global player as well. And we understand that communication is evolving and we are more on digital platforms as we speak. So we felt, because we haven't started after the media briefing of the GCIS cluster, we started a little bit far earlier, whereby we felt we have a responsibility to keep the public informed, but also to create some awareness around the acceptable behaviors of the general public. And this is not particularly for the elections. It applies across whether there's elections or no elections. And we felt the public needs to be reminded to say, whilst the Constitution gives us the rights, particularly the right of the freedom of speech, that right of freedom of speech does not include the propaganda.
Yeah.
But also to say we want to have a very responsible citizenry. So whilst we have rights, the rights, they come with responsibilities. And most of the time, we always emphasize on the rights. And we don't highlight the responsibilities that comes with the rights, and particularly because as government, we want to see a very cohesive nation. We want to see unity in our nation as well. And therefore, we felt it is very important that we make the public aware and also that they understand that there are laws that regulate the issues that we're talking about, so that whilst government always say it is not an excuse to be ignorant of the existing laws, but we also complement that by creating awareness of the laws that exist.
So for the ordinary South African who is listening to you and my conversation right now, they're probably wondering what kind of information will be considered criminal or the propagation of propaganda, so that they don't fall foul of the law. Are you able to give us an example of this?
An example is information that is being, should I say, produced with the intent to either incite violence or inflammatory kind of information, or also information that is intended to mislead people, and then it will then automatically lead to issues like racial disintegration or ethnicity disintegration and so forth. That we call disinformation because the person who is producing such information or who is then sharing such information has got an intention. And then we call it misinformation when an ordinary person, let me not say an ordinary person, but let me say the second person or the third person receives such information but does not double check its authenticity and credibility, but at the same time doesn't look at the consequences that sharing such information might lead to.
Yeah.
So, and we also have what we call propaganda, whereby you would find people, particularly of certain stature, sharing false information around particularly the programs of government. And I want to highlight that to just say the programs of government and the programs that are intended to benefit the public at large. And the intention of that as well is to mislead the public. But over and above misleading the public, you then get to have a very angry society, a society that sometimes might be panicking unnecessarily,
Yeah.
and mistrust, particularly to the institutions that public should be trusting, so that we can have a very strong democracy.
So we know that the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster, that's what we call this grouping of ministers, they are the ones who ought to punish this. I'm wondering, where does GCIS, which is where you sit, government communications, where do you fit into this picture?
Okay. So the government communication and information system forms part of all the government clusters, because at the end of the day, there's communication that needs to go to the public. So as part of the JCPS cluster, government communication and information system is a key participant and is a key member, because at the end of the day, there are things that need to be communicated to the public. And we also are responsible to coordinate. For an example, you were referring to the briefing that took place yesterday. Whilst GCIS in per se was not communicating, but to put the cluster together such that they are able to communicate to the public is a responsibility of GCIS.
All right. Final question then. If a person is found to have been doing exactly what we are saying here and right now, that it is against the law, using their social media platform, this could either be X, it could either be on Facebook, or any social media platform you may think of. If that person falls foul of the law, how much time are they likely to spend in jail? If not, how much money are they likely to pay as punishment for perpetuating or producing propaganda?
Actually, it depends based on the intensity of the criminal activity itself that has been committed. But I would just like to say that there are various laws that, particularly your Criminal Laws Amendment Act, if it's in line with tampering of the critical infrastructure, then we're talking about things like 8 years in jail and a fine that might not be exceeding some, I think it's R1 million, but I will just have to double check. So in others, it's like any other crime whereby you talk about the crime of theft, and then the investigation will then reveal the gravity of such crime, and it will then be able to indicate the offense and the sanctions that should be effected.
Nomonde Mnukwa, let me thank you very much for your time.